What if you doubled the joysticks on your controller? Last time that happened, it changed gaming forever. This is when gaming added the second joystick, a history in 9 minutes. The second joystick might be the biggest controller breakthrough of modern gaming, but when it first showed up, it was a gimmicky add-on for an almost dead genre. Coming up in the next 9 minutes, who took the risk first, why it got mocked, and how it became the default control scheme for 3D games. When talking about the second joystick, it's important to acknowledge the biggest needs in gaming leading up to it. When 3D gaming hit the main stage, most notably with the breakout success Super Mario 64, the Nintendo 64 had anticipated a new problem and solved it all in one fell swoop. 3D gaming would be best served with more articulated controls that allowed for more precise movement in 3D space. The N64 was the first household console to implement the joystick as a primary movement control. It was a perfect fit, easy to learn, and freeing to use. But there was a problem. In the 2D gaming world, the player was responsible for two things: their movement and their actions. The game took responsibility for everything else. But in 3D gaming, developers handed off another major responsibility to the user: the camera. Nintendo anticipated this problem as well, with the solution being 4 directional camera buttons, the C buttons. However, compared to the freedom that the joystick provided to movement, these buttons felt clunky and limiting. There were now 3 important control dynamics that players needed to master, but with just 2 thumbs, gamers had to compromise and leave one control type untouched if they wanted to use the other 2. And in the world of 3D platformers, making quick and precise movement and action inputs takes priority, and all gamers could do was hope that the camera followed suit on its own.
Dude, I suck at Rainbow Ride. I'm gonna game over.
Regardless, as the N64 introduced the joystick and the 3D space to household gaming, it was received well, problematic cameras and all. Players resolved that this frustrating component was something they had to live with if they wanted to interact with the digital world in 3D. But one game developer stumbled into the solution while creating a shooting game, released 21 years earlier. In 1975, an arcade machine made its appearance into the arcade game world: Gunfight, a top-down 1v1 shooting game where players controlled their respective cowboys with one joystick to move and one to aim.
This is getting out of hand. Now there are 2 of them.
And it worked. It was met with great success, scoring top 5 or above on multiple different arcade charts for best video game. Now this game deserves some recognition, but it doesn't quite count. The real solution came much, much later. In 1996, at the same time as the release of the Nintendo 64, Sony had an idea. Its original PlayStation had been released 2 years prior, and Sony saw the opportunity to ride the success as much as possible. With the back catalog of arcade games and the new 3D space to work with, PlayStation created the PlayStation Analog Joystick, a massive dual joystick controller, the kind that you sit on the floor with in front of your TV and joystick away. It leveled up the original PlayStation controller, which only had one D-pad for simple movement. Now new racing games, flight games, and mech shooting games could be released with a new mechanic that allowed for bidirectional gameplay, one joystick for movement and one joystick for aim direction, though the feeling still leaned arcade and not the move and aim mechanic as we know it today. The steep $70 price tag of the joystick, plus the departure from the more familiar control design, severely limited the success of this design risk. Sony created a compromise 1 year later: the dual analog controller. At half the price of the PlayStation Analog Joystick, this design was made as a gimmicky compromise, not as a breakthrough. No one saw what it could be. A new, more popular iteration was released a few months later: the DualShock controller, which added rumble. One small team of game developers working on what would end up being a popular ape-centered franchise were given special access to the DualShock controller before release. 6 months into production, inspired by the controller's potential, they spent the next 2 years developing the first game to require the dual analog controller. Can you guess what it is? That's right, 1999's Ape Escape. A game where you stop an evil time-traveling ape, technically a monkey, from mobilizing his monkey army across time by using your left thumbstick to move and your right thumbstick to control items and gadgets. Although it was an admittedly creative implementation, the first dual analog game wasn't even in the ballpark of what we would consider intuitive dual joystick gameplay today. That came 1 year later in the form of the first-person shooter Alien Resurrection. Based on the 1997 movie of the same name, this survival horror game had already been scrapped and remade 2 times in a grueling, almost 5-year grind, starting as a top-down game, then third-person, and finally switching to first-person shooter after the release of the DualShock. They settled into a new control scheme, left thumbstick to move and strafe, and right thumbstick to aim. The first modern 2-thumbstick shooter. One might say modern gaming started here. And how was it received? With a horrible, inconsistent, and very inaccurate control system, Alien Resurrection is dead in the water. Gamers struggled with this new control design, and while you may mock them now, they do have a point. It's the same reason my mom was far less eager to play Star Wars Battlefront with me growing up than she was Mario Party. We forget that we learned this skill by brute force exposure until we play a game with someone who never learned that skill. It's awkward, it's unintuitive, and it's frustrating, feeling a lot like writing with your non-dominant hand. This difficulty challenge was set before gamers, inducing seemingly endless failures. But those with the grit to push through could experience the thrill of achieving true mastery of the game. I wonder if the reason the public changed their mind about dual joysticks is the same reason the Dark Souls franchise found success. The failures hurt, but the mastery allowed for gameplay that had never been seen before, and the competitive nature of gaming called out this drive to be better. All gaming needed was an accessible outlet that allowed this hard-fought skill to pay off in a satisfying conclusion. Did such an outlet exist? In November of 2001, a company not yet known for its gaming consoles stepped into the ring with Sony's PlayStation 2 and Nintendo's newly released GameCube. The Xbox, released by Microsoft, fully committed to the dual joystick layout, launching with a new signature game released the same day, Halo: Combat Evolved. More than just a game title, Bungie's developers had fine-tuned the dual joystick movement and aim precision, allowing users to fine-tune their sensitivity settings to their preference and toggle difficulty depending on how hardcore they were. The combat felt intuitive, with less focus on the buttons on the face of the controller and more attention given to the triggers on the back, solving the 2 thumbs problem. The game and the console were a smash hit, both becoming massive franchises, and other games and consoles iterated on the success, turning a compromise of coincidence and a criticized failure to a breakout hit, to what we recognize today as the standard for first and third person gaming. 5 years later, the Emmys acknowledged Sony for its breakthrough innovation of the dual analog stick style with an Emmy Award. Well earned, though it failed to acknowledge the achievement 40 plus years prior of the original 2-joystick arcade game, Gunfight.
You took everything from me.
I don't even know who you are.
The implementation of the second joystick into modern gaming wasn't planned and expertly organized. It was stumbled into, and yet today it is taken for granted as one of the most basic parts of any controller, which makes me wonder if there is another, even better controller design out there just waiting for us to stumble into. This has been the history of when gaming added the second joystick. Okay, bye.